Hi, my name is Jacqueline Huskisson, and I am the Programming Coordinator for Elephant Artist Relief. Thank you for joining us for our final Umbrella Talks of 2020, hosted in 2021, called Practice.Practice.Practice. It is an interview with 3 local artists who we find that are just amazing and are doing a great job, and we wanted to highlight them. This year we have MelVee X, Alberta Williams, and Levin Ifko. Before we get started, I would like to give a land acknowledgement. I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the peoples of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot First Nation tribes of Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai, and Stoney Nakoda First Nations tribes of Chiniki, Bearspaw, Wellesley, and the Tsuut'ina First Nation. The city of Calgary is also homeland to the historic Northwest Métis and to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Finally, we acknowledge all nations, Indigenous and non, who live and work and play on this land, and who honor and celebrate this territory. And before we get started as well, I would like to give a moment of silence for Amy Willer, who is the founder of the Moonstone Creations. Thank you, everyone. Also, I apologize. I forgot to give my pronouns earlier on. I am she and her. Um, Thank you, and I want to pass this on to Jill, the EAR president, to introduce Jill and Katy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jill Armstrong. I'm president of Elephant Artist Relief Society, and I want to thank you for being here today to hear these 3 artists talk about their very compelling practices. We're excited to have them here. And for any of you who are not familiar with Elephant Artist Relief Society, just very quickly, we are an organization that's been around since 2007. Our tagline used to be helping artists to be artists in Calgary, and now it's kind of expanded. We say we're here to empower artists to be artists in Calgary and surrounding area. We provide events like this to help artists hear about other artists and their practices, which I think most artists find very inspiring. We also offer workshops on helping artists with their careers and sometimes health issues. And tied in with that, we also provide emergency funds for artists who are in a crisis, which is usually health related. You can find out more information about this on our website, Elephant Artist Relief Society. .com. It's .com, isn't it? Yes. Okay. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's event. And without further ado, I will introduce Katy McKelvey, who will be interviewing our artist today. So take it over, Katy, and please, everybody, enjoy.
Hi there. Thank you, Jill. My name is Katy McKelvey. I am she, her, and I am really excited to be here today. The Umbrella Talks, just a little intro, involved from a 2-day intensive, great time, but very intensive and difficult to get people out during the Alberta Culture Days. And we found there was always a lot of competition and people wanted to do everything. And so, and it's hard to get people to give up a really lovely Saturday, Sunday at the end of the summer. So what we thought is, how about we try to sustain it through the year with different types of workshops. So we've had hands-on do along with Paula Tim. We've had Marianne Elder do a great thing talking about getting into grad schools and some of the more practicalities of the artist life. And today we are super fortunate to have three really fascinating artists here in Calgary, Alberta, MelVee, and Levin. So my first question to each of you is, what got you into the arts? Levin, do you want to start?
Sure.
Sorry, Katie, I think we were supposed to introduce the artists first.
Oh, I'm sorry. They were going to talk about themselves, right?
Yeah, sorry, Levin.
Sorry. So
Okay.
Levin, if you don't mind, starting by
We'll
talking
go
about
Levin first.
yourselves and including what got you into the arts.
Amazing. Hi everyone, I'm Levin. I'm a visual artist as well, a visual artist, media artist, sort of beginning to do some more music related things in terms of my art in the city. I'm also a student right now at the Alberta University of the Arts, finishing up my degree, hopefully by the end of this calendar year. So that should be exciting. A lot of my work has to do with queerness, gender expression. Also, I make a lot of work that for myself is a bit of an acknowledgement of mental health and resilience. And yeah, that is me. And what was the other question, Katie, you were asking?
What got you into the arts? How did you decide, okay, this is the thing?
For me, I think I always, I mean, this might be a bit of a corny answer, but I feel like I've always been really interested in the arts and knew that quite young that I this was something I wanted to do. I think the specifics of that I'm always trying to figure out and navigate what that actually looks like as a visual artist or either musician or writer or all of this sort of stuff. So I'm always navigating that, but it's just always been a huge part of my life, I'd say.
Great. Thank you very much. MelVee, can you please introduce yourself, a little bit about what you do, and let us know, how did you begin? What spurred you into this?
Absolutely. Oki Natanaku MelVee X Ginuhtutu Moginstas. So in the language of the Nitstapi or the Blackfoot, the people of the Blackfoot Confederacy, I said, hello, my name is MelVee X, and I am from Moginstas, aka Calgary, the place where the elbow and the bow meet. My pronouns are she, her, they, them. I was born and raised in Calgary, for better or for worse. We'll probably dive into that a little bit. I am a multidisciplinary artist. I don't have this trademarked yet, but I'm calling it my MelVee trifecta. So I'm a spoken word artist, burlesque performer, as you see here. That was, I think, my first or second time on the stage. Second time, there we go, as a burlesque performer. So that was in 2019. Yes, it's been almost 2 years now. And I'm a photographer as well, and kind of increasingly being called to the visual realm. I mean, technically I always have. I loved drawing and creative expression since I was little, but I couldn't draw very well. So I kind of left the visual piece behind and started really to make a name for myself as an artist in the spoken word community. And so to answer Katie's question, what got me into the arts? Some asshole broke my heart.
Oh.
I wrote a poem about him. I shouldn't say this as a joke now, especially after Amy's passing, but the person who I wrote the poem about, he is deceased. He's been gone for I think 3 or 4 years now. But low-key, he was an asshole when he was alive. Sorry, I know you're supposed to say nice things about people, and I do wish him a safe passage into the realm of the ancestors, but I had to express that. It was such a traumatic experience. And so I read at an open mic at Cafe Koi, and it was kind of history from there. So short answer, asshole broke my heart. And look at the artistic career that has flourished from what originally began as a really traumatic experience.
You know, that's fascinating and very important to hear. Sometimes Jonathan Richman's a great singer that I love, and he talks about kicking open the door to Bohemia. And sometimes you just have to kick that door open and get in there. So Alberta, if you're ready, can you please introduce yourself, a little bit about your work and how you came into the arts?
Yeah, for sure. Atitu, Atira Ingniq. Alberta Rose W is my English name, and Ingniq is my Inuit Valley Wheat name. I'm of mixed ancestry of Inuit and settler, and I go by she and her pronouns, and I graduated a few years ago from Alberta University of the Arts. My degree was in painting, but I'm an interdisciplinary artist, so like the idea or the concept for what I'm going to create is the foundation, but what form it takes is pretty open to whatever I sort of like intuitively feel like it should become, like what it should manifest as. And as for like what got me into the arts, I think it's maybe a bit cliche, but true. Like I've always been creative from childhood. I've always wanted to be an artist. So like ever since I was a young kid, I was like, I'm gonna be an artist, and yeah, so here I am.
That's fantastic. I don't think that's cliche at all. I think that's something you learn and you just keep finding yourself pulled towards from an early age, you know.
Yeah.
I don't think that's cliche at all.
Yeah, and sorry.
Go ahead.
I just feel like I was pretty fortunate in that I had parents who were supportive of my creativity, and they never like, you know, don't you want to be a doctor or a lawyer? They were just like, oh, okay, that's what you want to do.
That's awesome. Actually, that kind of led into my next question is, was that direction that you've all experienced supported through the people around you? No, she's shaking her head really hard. So Alberta, yes. And it's great to have people who recognize that's who you are and that's where you're going, whether they like it or not. So MelVee, do you want to explain?
Absolutely. I mean, I was going to bring it up anyway, so I'm glad it was one of the questions. My parents were not really encouraging or discouraging, if that makes sense. So, and I forgot to mention it in my little intro. I'm a Black woman, and a queer Black woman at that. Though I was born and raised in Calgary, here in Canada, I don't feel Canadian. I usually don't lead with that in my intros. I say that I'm Black because that's, you know, really at the core of my my experience. My dad is a white settler Canadian, English, French, Dutch background. My mom is ironically or unironically from St. Lucia, which was actually, I realized as I say now, colonized by those three countries that kind of went back and forth in their fighting of St. Lucia. So, you know, the Caribbean kind of upbringing is you're a doctor, lawyer, or failure. But my mom was not really, really didn't impress that upon me. Like she was kind of a rebel, I realize now. Like she actually didn't want to leave St. Lucia. It was my grandmother who sent her abroad to find work. The unemployment in St. Lucia, it still hovers around like 50% for people under 30. So there wasn't a lot of prospects for her in 1980, whenever she came to Canada in the 1980s. And so she was kind of a rebel. So she never, you know, kind of drilled it into us that we needed to go on this particular path, but there wasn't really the encouragement side of it either. I mean, she didn't have her high school education, right? She came to Canada as a maid, like that. That's how her permanent residency, like it was attached to being with an employer. So she didn't really have I think the exposure to, you know, what a post-secondary education or like really dedicated career exploration could mean. My dad comes from a really working class background. Like he's still working with the same company that he started working with when he was 18 years old.
Wow,
So like,
though.
I mean, yeah,
More power to
the
him.
union, right, and all that good stuff. So he's, you know, he'll retire from that job, I think, in about 10 years time. So they never said don't be an artist, but I definitely like got the vibe that it was not something that I should really be seriously pursuing. And actually I did my damnedest to stay away from the arts. So in junior high and high school, wasn't really involved in the arts at all. I took like drawing classes, like art classes in high school, but that was about it. When I went to university, I wanted to be an environmental scientist, but my calculus skills did not allow for that.
Yes.
So I ended up studying anthropology instead. And my parents, I mean, they were like happy, but again, like they were just pretty neutral. But I had internalized, you know, the societal message that, you know, being an artist is a luxury, and that was not an avenue that, you know, working class Black girl would have available to her. So I never really considered it. And it wasn't, you know, until maybe 2-3 years into my practice that I even called myself an artist, right? Even though I was, you know, getting asked to, you know, share my work and all this stuff, I didn't consider myself an artist, you know, up until halfway through my career. So that's, you know, it's been more of a, you know, like coming into that identity. It's always been there, I realize now, but you know, I actively tried to avoid any sort of trying to be in the arts, or like even in university, I have a Bachelor of Science in Anthropology because I couldn't stomach the idea of having a Bachelor of Arts. So I was like, I need to have a Bachelor of Science in Anthropology, right? And I was just like so opposed to like being the failed artist, failed writer, you know, stereotype that, you know, that I had imbibed from the culture. So long way of saying
Okay.
no. No, but hey, you know, I feel like that's kind of, you know, the artist's life sometimes is, it chooses you, and then you have to find your way to, you know, embrace it.
It's a circuitous route. It can be something you avoid, or something maybe you feel like you've fallen out of, but you are still there. It's a very interesting path. Absolutely. Yeah. So, you know, it also, I think, allows for a lot of options and sort of lateral experiences, which in this day and age is kind of how we're living. So, you know, that's a good grounding, I think. Levin, you are still in the thick of your student experience. How is your supportive group, but also I think, and leading into the next sort of topic is how do you find the Calgary community, or this area's community, supportive of your practices? So this is what we're thinking, where we're leading. How is the student experience working for you, Levin?
It's been good. I definitely feel like I have had a really supportive environment growing up, from my parents, who maybe didn't always understand what I was doing, but I think understood my need to do it. And so that is definitely a huge privilege, and I feel very honored to have that sort of familial, supportive environment that I'm in. In terms of the Calgary community and being in school as well, I think my journey with being in school has been quite up and down. This is how I would describe it with my hand. But it's been quite up and down. I think I am a person by nature who struggles a lot with their mental health in school, and that's something that I'm always continuing to learn more about, and something that I feel like I've just more recently come to acknowledge. But in terms of a communal support system, I think that community is a big word, and it's a word that is used a lot to describe something that folks find to be very that I imagine to be very singular. But I think there's a reality in Calgary and Mohkinstsis and the surrounding areas is that there's so many different communities and so many, it's huge. Like there's I find a lot of the community that I find myself involved in right now comes from being a student at the Alberta University of the Arts, formerly ACAD, and I think there's it's easy to get wrapped up in that community and think that that's the only, and be in this bubble of like, this is what art is, and it isn't always, and it's part of it in the city, but it really is so expansive. And I think I found pockets of community, pockets of companionship in a lot of different places, and sometimes I find pockets of companionship in communities that I never imagined I would be a part of, and then in the communities that I thought I was supposed to find companionship in, I didn't really, and there was this sort of disconnect. But that's a very very roundabout way of saying, like, I think there's so much to the word community, and there's a lot of different things going on. You can, for me, I've been able to find moments and pockets, as I describe it, of places that I feel quite loved and accepted, and where I'm being pushed in a direction I feel really good about.
What a great answer. Thank you. You're right. Community is a huge, huge word. And I guess, for lack of a better word, that's the one we are using today. Also, it can encompass even just general attitudes as you move through, your life. I always remember I spent 10 years in Winnipeg from 2006, 2016. But we were here in Calgary for all the 90s until 2006. And one of the things that always struck me is in Calgary, a sculptor friend of mine did a sculpture of a bird, and someone said, "Hey, dude, where'd you get that bird?" And it's like, "You made it." He said, "I made it." And they're like, their minds were blown. And in Winnipeg, my husband was in his garage, and the postman came up and he goes, "Oh, you're a sculptor." And it was just like, yeah. And there was a kind of a different attitude, like everybody does something. And I'm hoping to find that changing here in Calgary, that people are musicians or writers, or, they spend their winters in the back, in the basement, in the backyard, doing things, making things, creating things. And it's not always going to be the same thing. You're not always, "Oh, I just paint." I mean, maybe you do, and you're really good at it. But there's, I'm hoping for in the community more of a fluidity. So that's, that's where I guess that question is coming from, is it's less rigid, I'm hoping, lately, looking for ways for artists to connect to various communities and not be stigmatized and not be all like, "Oh, well, you're an artist." And there's, I think, almost also the word artist gets so big and difficult for people to wrap their head around. Anyway, sorry, Alberta. How are you finding this area, your communities, supportive, not supportive? How are you finding support? I guess that could be the question.
I would say that people have pretty much always been, for the most part, supportive. Of course, there are a lot of people who do have those like entrenched capitalist ideals of money making as
Right.
success, and you know, they would just be like, "Oh, can you do graphic design? Can you work for a newspaper? Like, how will you make money from this?" And there's no like understanding of just obtaining knowledge just for the sake of learning, or just doing art or creating things just for the sake of, you know, for the, like as an important thing in society. And it's like it's really in every part of our society, but somehow it's sort of disregarded a lot of the time. But even in school, like you were saying, how sometimes it can be rigid. I do definitely recall one of my instructors kind of like encouraging me to create work that was all very similar in style so that I could be recognizable. And
yeah.
I, just as someone who's like ADHD, I'm like, I can't do that. That's not natural for me. So I'm just gonna do what I want and see how it works out.
Yeah.
And that's been a case so far.
I think that's almost a strength that I'm seeing in younger artists who are like, no, I'm not just going to be the one thing. Or even if you are making things that are selling or almost like what people might call product, there's still pigeonholing going on. Maybe it's just expectations. People, lack of imagination, are not willing to think outside of what they understand you to be or you to be doing. It's like, oh, well, MelVee did 2 burlesque shows or 3 burlesque shows. That's it. That's all. That's her thing. Whereas, you know, or it is a struggle, I think, to be able to move cross genre. And I guess we're interested in exploring how that works for you all.
Great.
Also dealing with those expectations, I guess the word stigma could, or pigeonhole, but maybe just expectations that you feel get put upon you. So somebody want to speak more to that? MelVee, maybe?
Yeah.
Well, the thing that happens, I think, is that people who aren't like heavily involved in the arts have ideas, like they have a few ideas about what art is, and so they tend to ask like, oh, do you do painting? Do you do landscape painting or oil painting or watercolor painting? Or like, can you design my tattoo for me, please? And I'm like, that's not what I do. And it's kind of like as shortly as possible explain that it's like that's not necessarily what art is about. Or you get the classic like, I can't even draw a stick man, and it's like, that doesn't matter. You don't have to be able to draw very well to be an artist. Like that's not the most important thing about being an artist.
I agree. I think that's changing, hopefully. MelVee?
Absolutely, yeah. This is the advantage of not having a formal education in the arts, is that I had no idea what I was getting myself into, for one. And so I went up on a stage and did a thing. And then I realized people wanted to, you know, see more and hear more. And not that I was shocked at that. Like I really get irritated now when I see artists, and usually it comes from a cultural place of like, not every culture values art in the same way, in the, you know, the capitalistic sense of creating art. I saw, and I bring this up because I saw this ad, it was a YouTube ad about these this cartoon artist and his wife, how, you know, the one with you know, she takes such a hot shower, like his skin's falling off and she's like smiling. So those two, and they have like a YouTube campaign or whatever. And the wife was like, oh my God, I can't believe we're getting paid to do art. And I was like, shut your mouth. We should be paid for art. Damn it. Don't be surprised at this. So I was so mad. I was like, oh, you know, thousands of people, or million, if not millions, will see that. And I was like, no, no, we need to be paid for our work. But kind of going back to my original point, I didn't have, I didn't have, and I still don't have formal training, in the sense of having, a degree in the arts. And so, there was really no question to me of what I was going to do or what I couldn't do. It was more so, well, what did I want to explore? What was I going to put the time and effort into? What did, the artists that I was starting to meet show me was possible? And to me, because I've thought about this a lot, what is, the advantage of not having a formal arts education? And it's that the pigeonholing was never there for me. I've been, interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary pretty much from, maybe not from the beginning, because I was really, focused on spoken word. But even within that, right, there's, the page poets, right, who create work primarily to be read, and then the spoken word poets or artists that are, creating work to be performed. And so I always kind of had that, that possibility in my mind that I would be able to do more than one form. And now, kind of like Alberta was saying, I recently got diagnosed with ADHD, so it's not really going to happen for me that I'm going to just focus on one art form anyways. But it was definitely not part of my experience to have that fear of, I can't go out of this, because I didn't actually know. It was like, oh, what am I going to do? I'm just going to do whatever I have the capacity for.
Right. Oh, well, that's really helpful. I think it's great to see, in a sense, that there is support for that movement, for people to explore different things.
Mm-hmm.
I really think overall, attitudes towards that kind of, very linear, very, this is the path you'll be on, and you will paint these paintings, and you'll show in these shows, and you will be in these galleries. And then, as my friend who was in Toronto at the time said, and then I will die. He is like, no, I'm going to play the guitar. I'm going to write music. I'm going to, you can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread man attitude of a lot of artists I see today. It's like, oh, well, you thought that's what I was going to do?
You know what,
tap
Katy?
dance too.
I can't even really imagine modern day artists now really truly sticking to one form. Like, even given the pandemic, right, and the fact that more and more artists are having to do the Zoom shit. I mean, this is not shit, but I'm starting to hate Zoom. Anyways, with the expectation that artists will have social media now, I don't know how you can stick to just one form anymore. Like, even writers, they need a social media presence, or they're going to have a hard time finding a publisher, right? And a social media presence kind of forces you to think about visually, how are you going to communicate? And I don't see how an artist can just paint or just write anymore. Like, social media, I really think blurs those distinctions by the nature of the medium.
That's a really good point. And actually, I think that's going to kind of loop back to some other questions that I had later on, but why don't we talk about them now? Let's just talk about it. How has your practice changed in the last year? But also in a I want a little positive, because I'm all about being positive. What has sustained you? Whether it's art or not, what is sustaining you? Was it like movies, or like what? How has things changed? Because it totally has. Like, we all have changed. What is sustaining you right now? Yeah. So, Levin, you just unmuted yourself, so go.
Unmuted myself. What sustained me? I think, well, to answer the first question, how has my art changed over the past year? I think, it's changed because it had to change. And that's just the nature of life in general, as things change because they have to.
Yeah, they just do.
and I change because I have to. And I think a lot of my work right now, or things I'm currently working on, have to do with this sense of fluidity and change. And it isn't really, for me at least, it just hasn't always been an option, especially since the pandemic. Like I think there was a point last year, and this sort of gets more into the question of like, how are you sustaining yourself? But in March, when everything went into lockdown, I mean, I know I was having a really rough mental health time before COVID hit, and then when COVID hit, it all sort of came to the it came, it went where it went. And
Yeah.
but I think part of what really helped during that time, especially, and what still helps, is like acknowledging that I feel shitty, and acknowledging that I'm like burnt out, and like
Yeah.
taking the time to rest. And especially because I was able to have that time to rest. And I didn't have a job at the time, so I mean, as much as that wasn't great, it was an opportunity for me to say, hey, I really needed to stop. Like, I really needed to hold things off that I was doing, because I was running at a pace that that just wasn't sustainable for me. And but in terms of art and change, I think my practice has changed over the past year, because I've become more less concerned with what other people want my practice to be, and more concerned with directions I've been wanting to explore. And I don't even think particularly that means I have like a plan of what I want to do and where exactly I want to go, but I have a lot of different things I want to explore. Like, something I've been working a lot on over the past year has been knowledge about like music production. That's something that's been super interesting to me.
Yeah.
And so that's something I've wanted to explore. And I guess to round that answer off, I think I have a knowledge where I'm like, okay, things can change at any time. I'm gonna change. Let's do the things that I want to explore, see how they work out, and be kinder to myself
Oh,
in the process.
that's great. That is a really insightful thing. And I think as awful as this time has been for so many people, the time to reflect is so important. And I don't know if it's our Anglo culture or what it is. This like treadmill thing that happens is so like, you want to build a momentum, but at the same time, it's difficult to sustain. I recall an interview I heard on Q with this great band from Quebec, and they had just come out with a big CD, and they'd done a tour, blah, 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 and this guy was like the guy. And the interviewer asked, what are you going to do next? What's going to happen next? And this such a smart artist, wish I knew their name, he said, we're going to reflect. And I thought, oh, well, duh. Like, shouldn't we all do that? Shouldn't we all just say, okay, I need a month to just like reflect? And we have to keep, I think, reminding ourselves that it's okay. And that's actually part of the process where you actually then gain insight. So, and to move forward. So yeah, thank you, Levin. That's really, really helpful. Alberta, what's sustaining you? What's keeping you up in the day?
My dog.
Oh yeah, dogs. Pets are the best.
I've been I was telling Jackie earlier that like I accidentally conditioned her. But when I put on like non-sweatpant clothes, she gets really excited because that means we're going out for a walk. Because I've just been
Yeah.
inside them, and like she's been like I've been going out and walking her as much as I can. So I think like getting outside and walking my dog has been really, really helpful. And then
Yeah.
also, like you said, like or like Levin said, was just like being gentle on myself, or like just allowing myself to rest for a bit or not be productive, which I think is something that's really drilled into us for our whole lives. Living under the system is like this idealized productivity when it's not sustainable.
Yeah. I
Just like
know.
I have a lot of ideas for work that I want to do, but not having access to a studio or like not wanting to go out or interact with a lot of people or places is like kind of force a lot of people to like, okay, we'll just have to put that on the back burner for now and wait until things are safer again.
Yeah. I get that. Yeah, I have a border collie too, and she is like, they are on the clock, man. She's like, it's 8 o'clock, time for my walk. Nope, time for this. She's she's relentless. If you don't stick to her schedule, she's like, oh, people, come on. So yeah, but yeah, it is. It's so. I actually, I think just being able to say, no, I'm gonna stay home. Think I gotta regroup here. It's so good. I think that's probably the best thing that it's been. Anyway, MelVee, do you have some stuff for us?
Yeah, I'm gonna drop a link
Oh,
in the
please.
chat because
Oh, yeah.
Alberta reminded me of this. The pop-up spaces, Calgary Arts. There was a CBC article that gave an update about it. It looks like it's still a thing, you know, as the COVID precautions shift. But basically, retail space is more and more abundant as businesses, don't make it through the pandemic. So they're looking to animate some of these spaces because more and more, there is just these empty spaces. So they're really looking for kind of short-term usage, whether that's short-term studio space or, if you have an idea for like a pop-up, a one-day kind of thing. And for somebody with ADHD, I'm like, thank God, like you got a defined goal, time. So I'm probably going to look into that a bit more. But as Alberta was talking about studio space, it made me think of those pop-up spaces.
That's great.
Right. So
I
I
didn't know
figure a
about
bunch
that.
of artists will be into this. So there you go.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, Katie, I haven't been, really sustaining myself or my practice at all. The summer was pretty harrowing for me. My mental health, it was like the last almost 3 years, right? Basically you get one episode of depression and then your brain, right, starts to get more and more susceptible to further episodes. So I was kind of coming out of a depressive episode, just, the end of 2019, and then boom, we're hit with COVID. And at first it didn't impact me the way I thought it would. I was in a full-time, full stack web developer program. And so that was kind of like where my focus was. But as I started to realize that I wasn't going to be a programmer, it was kind of like the weight of everything just hit me at once. It's like, I'd taken 6 months off of work to do this program full time. And then with the complication of the pandemic, we couldn't have the classes in person. That's like the reason why I took the program, was to have the in-person element, right? Because there's like thousands, hundreds of courses to teach yourself programming online. But the problem was I'm not going to be able to teach myself programming because I need to be around people, I need to be able to move, and I'm not going to hold myself accountable to try and teach myself programming. So that was starting to dawn on me that programming wasn't going to be it for me. And so and it was kind of like any sort of awareness that I had of the pandemic was kind of stayed off with the focus on the program. And once that, I was like, well, I'm not going to be probably not going to be a programmer. It was like bam, bam, bam. And so the summer was yikes. I most of the time watched an abundance of Dr. Phil.
Oh yeah.
Not proud of it, but you know what?
No, whatever works.
Something to do. So I watched a lot of stuff, and I got to kind of see, more of this, social media culture of creating like short videos. And I didn't really want that to be a part of my practice. Filmmaking can be quite labor intensive. So I've always kind of stayed away from it, even though I'm interested in film. I've made a short film. I'm like, okay, I can't afford to be a filmmaker, but now we're all having to figure out film elements to some degree, right? Is your lighting okay for people to see your face on Zoom? I'm aware that mine gets cut, but my apartment lighting is garbage. And I have a light in the back, so it's not going to get any better than this, folks. But I didn't sustain myself at first, and it was kind of around the September, October mark that I got the ADHD diagnosis, shifted meds and whatnot. And that's when I really started to, build up those habits again that do sustain me, like having a regular physical practice of some kind, whether that's yoga, dance, something to move around. And really, I think for me, leaning into that diagnosis of having ADHD, and knowing that all these ways in my life that I had felt like a failure, or that I just couldn't get my shit together, could be pretty easily explained, with an ADHD diagnosis, and having, the effective management of it, through medication and behavioral changes, right? And so that made a really big difference for me. And I started to really see, some things clearly in a way that I hadn't before, right? And I realized, oh, there's a reason why I'm always feeling exhausted or irritated when it comes to going to work. Actually, I quit a career actually that I had for 16 years with the Calgary Library. And I mean, there's many reasons, why I left my career. But one thing that the pandemic really brought to the forefront for me was, did I want to die in the service of my job? Because that, like, working with the public, you are at a higher risk of COVID regardless of what you do, whether you're a grocery store clerk, frontline responder, anything where you are with the public on a regular basis, you are at an increased risk of COVID, period. And it hit me. I already was planning on leaving the role. Like, that's why I took the full stack developer. Of course, I wanted to transition, but I was, in my blue vest one afternoon, and I was like, do I want to die for this job? And the answer was a resounding no. And that, like, really started to get the ball moving in terms of, I happened to poke, the CEO for the program that I just finished, and I like her as a person, so we went for a chat. And she's like, oh, we need somebody for this role. And she's like, you'd be perfect for this. And so I was just like, at the end, I was just waiting for her to get the contract done up so I could sign it and give my notice. And then I left, and the pandemic really clarified, who I want in my space, what do I want to do with my time, and what I want to do for a living. And those are wake-up calls that I think would have taken even longer without the stress of a pandemic.
Right. Well, I think, that kind of messes up my questions, but I think that is really fascinating.
You're still good,
it's
Katy.
Fascinating, because I think this, artist practice is difficult, and it is a practice that in the past, I guess you could say, was difficult enough as it was, and now we're in this situation of really rethinking, and I think there's a lot of value in that. I think in the beginning, I was feeling, to be honest, a lot of shame, because I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to run in the studio and do all these things that I never got to do. No, because I'm homeschooling 2 teenagers, and I'm trying to keep this house going, and I got laid off, so there's no money there. So, and to feel all those stresses at once, and to realize, as you all have, this is a time where I need to really, really rethink everything. You know, getting outside, walking the dog, that, like, creating a routine for me, like just a physical time-based routine is like, do this, do the dog, then do work. You know, if you don't walk the dog and she waits till 2 o'clock, then all day long she's going to harass you. You're not going to get your work done. You're not going to, like, creating a structure is important, and creating it as a practice and being more sort of mindful and instead of reactionary. I think a lot of artists I've spoken to are like, oh, well, you know, I have this deadline, so I have to make this art. And then, or I have a show coming up, so I have to make this art. But it's not really driven, like, it's driven from you. But at the same time, it's like, oh, here's a deadline. Here's, do this, do that. And do you really want to be always reacting, I guess, that way? So now I have to find a segue. So hang on. How you adapted. I maybe you could each address a challenge and a success you've had in rethinking your practices. Maybe just a small one, like something you do every day, or some way, like MelVee was mentioning how being online is so important. Has that changed the fabric, the texture of what you do? Or are you avoiding it like I do? That kind of thing. Is there anything really kind of really specific that you feel like, oh, you know, I made myself a studio. I put all my things in the cabinet, like, even if it's a small thing, like I daily work in my sketchbook? Or is there something specific you can say, this led to this success? Levin, maybe, do you have something you can tell us about?
Yeah, for sure. This is definitely a thing that since COVID has happened. I mean, first of all, absolutely the fabric of what I do has been changed, mostly because what I do now is I go to Zoom University.
I know, right?
You know, Microsoft Teams, but that's a whole thing. But I do spend a lot of time looking at my computer, and really I did it as soon as this pandemic hit. And honestly, I was beforehand as well. I am a media artist. I do a lot of like video editing and audio editing as well, and that's always been something I've been super into. But I think one thing that has really helped, that's just, you know, a small thing but a big thing and as well, was maybe I'll give a little context, but I moved back in with family after COVID hit, after a whole situation. But I just honestly wasn't getting out of bed, and I got a lot of encouragement from my mom to start going on walks. And at first I was like, oh, walk is not going to change anything. It's just walking.
Oh, Mom.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks.
But no, it really did, actually. Just getting out of the house, finding little things outside to become interested in. At one point, there was this puddle that I got really fixated on. And sort of in our neighborhood, there's this giant puddle. Like, it was so big, and I remember just walking through it one time and my boots overflowed with water, and it was just funny. So I'd go outside and like visit this puddle every day. I mean, not really visit it. I just walk past it or through it, and it would kind of freeze and refreeze, and then eventually it was gone, and it was this sort of weird experience of like, wow. That it felt, I was emotional. It felt really quite big, actually. But that experience of just going outside and even just finding a tiny thing, like a literal pool of water on the ground, to be
That's
interested
great.
in, and like um to to find some sort of light in, was something that really helps. And I do that, I continue to do that. Like I try and go on at least one walk a day. And it's sometimes, you know, like it isn't sometimes a long walk. Sometimes it's to go to the convenience store that's a block from my apartment. But you know, it is getting outside for me is something that's so important, I find.
That's great. Thank you very much. Sorry, I think my music popped on there for a second, but it's amazing being more in tune with nature, watching the birds or a puddle or yeah, anything that's like that. The animals. There's been more wild animals in my neighborhood. There's been some coyotes, and actually, I had a bobcat in my front lawn this past week. It was so exciting. And then there's like squirrel bits, but just that nature interacting can really, really put perspective on things. Thank you for that. Alberta, you've already talked about your wonderful dog. What kind of dog? I actually have to know. And what's the name?
She's also a border collie.
Awesome.
Yeah, she's a border collie mix, and yeah, just I found that I've come to the realization that walking has become like a meditative practice for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think just from being like non-neurotypical, the sort of standard like sit still and meditate thing is really hard for me. So getting out and just like disconnecting from all of my screens for a little while, for the most part, is a way for me to like really kind of clear my head, and I think it really puts things into perspective, because you know social media makes the world smaller in a lot of ways, and so you know it kind of use your viewpoint of what's like really important in life. And so I think being outside and like seeing the breadth of how big the world is, how amazing and how fleeting things are, it really helps like, oh, okay, so I don't have to like completely freak out if I'm not, you know, being productive right now. I can just relax a little while and like this is all still gonna be here, and like, you know, I'm still able to go out and walk, and like I recently also moved back in with my family during the pandemic. And so it has been really nice because I moved away from my hometown like 10 years ago, like exactly 10 years ago. So it's been interesting to be back and like seeing how it's changed, and like it's like seeing it through fresh eyes, because growing up here you sort of take things for granted and you're like, oh, whatever, it's just boring. But like being back has been like, oh, actually it's kind of beautiful here.
Yeah. I think that's I guess like almost a research. If you think of, you know, oh, I'm not being productive, but at the same time, how is that not productive? I mean, you're experiencing your environment, you're really reflecting upon it. That is a successful part, is to take that time to research, really. So that's lovely. I like that. Thank you. MelVee, you seem to have had a lot of successes. At the times, though, you know, maybe you could find one thing for us, but like also, yeah, expand upon that, please.
For sure. You know, to your point earlier, Katy, about reactionary, I like that. Well, I like how that term kind of frames the conversation, being reactionary in the arts, because I realized that was my practice as an artist, is that, you know, I'd get just kind of flooded with stuff, you know, it depends on the mood or the season or whatever, and I would respond to everything, and usually like I'm a pretty yes kind of person, right? Like and also like I'm an adventurer, so I'm like, sure, I'll do this thing once, and that's led me down some paths, to say the least. And I realized, oh right, like that, like always reacting to opportunities instead of creating them for myself was my artistic practice, and really shifting that to, I don't have to accept every opportunity, several of which are unpaid, you know, to come my way. And I really appreciate the phrasing of it. in terms of reaction, because I was reacting and not really thinking deeply about how do I want to interact? Do I even want my name associated with you know, this org or these people, right? I never even thought of it. I was just like, oh cool, someone's asked me to do a thing, I'll do it. And so now I've really noticed the shift. You know, I would say kind of my birthday is the time of year where I kind of start my resolutions, right? And that's when I feel renewal. So around October, that was kind of when I started to make that shift. And more I just feel better about saying no to stuff that doesn't fit with my vision, and instead of reacting, creating my own opportunities and seeing what I want to do. Like even something like this panel, right? It's great to not have to host, right? Yes.
I'm so nervous. Yeah.
Hosting is actually a lot of work, and I never really realized it because, you know, I have the host personality, and people are like, oh, MelVee will host this thing, like, and they'll ask me and I'll say yes. And I realized doing a show last week for a friend how much work it actually is. And usually what would end up happening is I do stuff, not be prepared for it because I didn't take into account the time it would take and all these things. And then like I'm usually, it's very rare that I've just totally blown a performance or a gig. And so I'll get it done, it looks great, and I'm exhausted. And I don't even know what I did to make that thing a success. I have no idea, because it's just, again, that reactionary responding. And so now I look at it as, when I take the time to think about, do I actually even have the capacity to do this thing? Should I be doing this thing? What kind of relationship do I want to maintain? That has been so helpful to my practice, and it ends up, you know, giving me more room for creativity and productivity, because I'm not just responding to everything. So that was like, I appreciate that framing. It's like, that's what I've done in my practice. I'm choosing what I want to do instead of just reacting to things that are thrown at me. And then one kind of really practical thing I've been doing is, I mean, I've always done this, like I take pictures of things that I find interesting, or like, just like, oh, like I had a connection to it, but I've started posting them to my Instagram stories, and or my feed stories if there's enough of them. And I'd like to, you know, I have many series ideas, but I like being able to kind of keep my own eye trained, but also to show other people that there's, you know, there's art and there's beauty, you know, in everything, you know, if you have the vision or the eye for it. And so that's like really, and I've gotten really, you know, like good response from people. Like, it's never been, oh, why are you posting this dirty old shoe? You know, it's like people are really kind of touched by, you know, by that. And, you know, at the start of the pandemic, or when everything was kind of locking down last March, I just started to notice all these like abandoned spaces or objects. And I posted that as a like a post on the feed, and people were really touched by it, because that was like the mood of the moment, was how like overnight we had to shift our way of life. And that really, you know, struck a chord with people. And I'm glad that I did that. And as we're talking, I was like, holy crap, you know, like that is journaling basically. I just don't have words to it. And so I'm going to make that more intentional. So thank you, everyone. Because I'm like, shit, I should, like, with all these pictures, I have hundreds of them now, like, write a thing about it, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, you know, that's great.
So cool about that too is like the way that these sort of discussions can facilitate something becoming more intentional in your lives, or like realizing like, oh, that just put into words something I've been experiencing, or something, or I just vocalized something that I didn't even know I was experiencing because I just said it out loud. But yeah, no, I totally feel that.
Yeah, good. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm glad this is helping. I think it helps everyone to really, you know, hear you all as artists, but also just hear that, you know, sometimes maybe you need to look at your practice as a seasonal thing. You know, January, February are really productive times, and, you know, back to school is not, and that's okay. that it doesn't have to be like this constant forward motion. Like maybe sometimes it's a moving back. I'm recalled actually from what you said, Alberta, about just the getting out in nature, but also Linda Osborne had an exhibition at the Nickel Arts Museum, well, I guess it was 2 years ago now. And she has this accumulative process. And she said that she had years ago had back issues, and she had to bend down so many times a day, like 100 times a day. And so she realized that as she walked on the beach, she would bend down and pick up some bit of thing. And that became her practice, was the need to bend down and stretch her back, and then collecting these things and then creating these collections of stuff on the beach. And but also just like taking that time to go out, and even a small motion like collecting a seed repetitively every day, you know, it creates a practice where you think, well, I'm not really being productive, but the whole process of doing that, getting outside the door, going outside, you know, thinking about, well, am I initializing my work? Am I the one picking the stuff off the beach, or am I just like randomly grabbing what I can to get these things done? It's interesting, so interesting to hear how people work. It's always so different. We still have time. It's 2:12. I think one of the things we had wanted to talk about is also, and MelVee, you touched upon it, was being online. Are you finding it's just a glut of stuff and you're just like, I'm on the computer for like 7-8 hours a day, and this is the last place I want to be doing anything? Is the analog part of a practice helping you? And how do you get feedback? Are you getting feedback from these online things, or are they just, you know, like, are you just pouring out everything? Are you getting community feedback or personal feedback? Is it a tool that helps you? Sometimes I feel that with Instagram or Facebook, it's just like an outpouring of stuff, but is there a flow coming back and helping and feeding you? So I know that's kind of like a big question, but because it's all online now, everything's online. Is that almost too much? Is it helping you? Is it feeding back to you? So I would really like to know how you're getting feedback. Who would like to? There you go, Mel.
Can I volunteer Alberta? Yes. Because I really appreciate you know, your comments and the chat, and just in case you wanted to like vocalize or verbalize any of it, not to put you on the spot, but I'm like, that's an important point.
Oh yeah, no worries. Yeah, just for folks who don't see the chat, yeah, I can definitely say what I wrote, which is just in response to what MelVee was saying when she was talking. And what I said was that I think there have been a lot of calls for artists, like how a lot of calls for like Indigenous artists can be very specific and limiting. Like they try to target artists who are like have traditional knowledge, which I think is like, it's wonderful that they want to be supportive of Indigenous like traditional practices, but it is also sometimes exclusionary to a lot of Indigenous artists who didn't have the privilege of growing up around the cultural practices,
right,
because of colonialism, and things like that. And so let's see what else. And also just that kind of like pigeonholes us in a way, because you know, it kind of, it says like, oh, this is Indigenous art, and it's like there's a whole scope of like contemporary Indigenous art, which is amazing. And like there are a lot of places that do recognize that, but sometimes it's like, oh, we want you to do work around, you know, cats or something, or like polar bears or hippies, and it's like, oh, I'm really more interested in doing this kind of work over here, but you know, maybe this, you have, sometimes I feel like you have to go to where the opportunities are in order to like have the experience and to survive. But sometimes it does mean that you have to kind of compromise what you really want to do a little bit.
Well, and that is a difficult topic when people are expecting certain things from you, and whether that is informing your art at the time or not. At some point, it might be where your interests are focused. It might not. There might be something else going. What is going on? Sorry, my music keeps popping on.
Katie's a popular lady.
I don't know. Sorry about that. But it's so hard to stand up and say, this is what I'm about, if you're interested.
Yeah.
I guess that has happened a lot lately, and that's a very interesting topic to talk about, is intention, expectation of what you're producing, your role. You were saying here in the chat, Alberta, supportive of traditional practices, which isn't inherently bad, but it can leave people out and then pigeonhole people who are doing that. And again, I think it's, is it supporting you? It might support you to be like, okay, yeah, I'm doing traditional practices, and this is really, you need to see this, because I think people need to. But also, is that what's supporting you right now? I guess it's a really tricky place to be in.
Well, on the flip side of that, there is like this whole, there's the expectation that I feel sometimes to make work that is really like within the realm of like Western colonial art schools. And like I had the privilege of going to post-secondary and getting a degree in like starting to understand the language and history of like colonial art. But I've been disillusioned in the past at times, or like disenfranchised a bit, because it felt really exclusionary and elitist. And so I try to make work that is accessible to people who don't necessarily like know the whole history of like art, and like I try to use like a visual language or communicate my idea in a way that people can understand without having to have like an art degree.
Yeah, that's really important. Unfortunately, the European art tradition, the colonial art tradition, still, like in so many ways, categorizes, prioritizes, and even, historically has always prioritized. Painting was always number one. Printmaking was always like, well, it's just a reproduction of a painting. It's not actually an art form. Sculpture was somewhere in the middle, and things like photography, those were like, talk of the day. Like it was like not even a thing. So
any feminine sort of craft-based practice?
Oh, anything craft-based, like I'm a knitter, there's, it's just, it still is perpetuating, and it's very difficult to push it aside, or just, I don't know. It's interesting to see how people either acknowledge it, move beyond it. It's hard, this exclusion. And I think, is there a feedback that also, is there a place that you're getting input into whatever the practice is in a, I want to say supportive, but I think the important thing is to get the feedback and to find people who can see where you're trying to go. One of the things that ear does, or that I feel that, and why I'm interested in ear, is it tries to support the process of being an artist, the practice of being an artist, the business of being an artist, all of those steps. I come from, I went to school, art school, didn't know what else to do, but also come from the artist run center tradition. And I love artist run centers. I love just that they're there, but it was always the end result. It was the product and not the process. And so part of the process, and I think is really now, is, are you feeling more or less cut off? Like, because of the pandemic, granted, but there's less exhibitions, there's also all this online thing, but sometimes that can be like, hello, I made this thing, and everybody goes, yeah, that's pretty, thanks. And you think, what? I did a pretty thing. I put so much work into this. And so, are we supporting each other? Maybe that's the question. And how can we do that better? Artistically, and as we produce in the process of being artists, because it's not always the end result. Like, it's all very well and good to have a show and people go, yeah, I really like your stuff, wow, it's great, but it sometimes falls thin. So I guess my question is, how, like, is the online stuff helping you? Is it giving you feedback? Are you able to connect to mentors? How is this online reality working for you? Levin, I'm gonna get you go first.
All right. I think it's important to acknowledge that, like, over the past year, maybe because of the pandemic, but not even just because of the pandemic, I think there's, in this area specifically, especially in this, like, sort of fine arts realm, where fine arts realm, whatever that means, but like, there's been a sort of reimagining process of, like, what being an artist means, but also, like, what do artists want, and what do artists run centers want to do with their power and their sort of prestige, and what do other galleries want to do, and not even just galleries. I think, like, there's even personally for myself, there's been a big process of going, like, hey, is this what I've been going to school for the past year for, and what I've been told is the sort of goal, which is to, same as Katy for me, was to say, all right, you want to show in artist run centers, you want to get opportunities, you want to do all those sorts of things. What I've been practicing and what I've been really interested in is reimagining what that looks like for myself as a person who's had trouble navigating those spaces, and found some of those spaces really had high expectations for them, and then it sort of wavered from my values and my goals. And I think a big part of that for me has been clarifying, like, what are my values? what are the things that I enjoy doing, and what do I want to put more energy into? And that, I don't know if that answers the questions about I don't know if that answers the question entirely. But that's been a huge consideration for myself.
Right. I think I think what I'm trying to access is how do we create a dialogue about these questions through making art. Alberta, you're talking about the expectations of the art community and the art world and the big fine art ball, as Levin puts it. This is fine art. This is fine art, but this is not. But this, and how do we? I think in some ways the online world now helps us to smoosh it up, but also bring it into question. And right now, especially say with traditional practices, that's a big question. Are we just expecting a certain thing to be a certain thing? Oh, well, this is traditional baskets from the Northwest Coast, and they must follow this form. Or can we then take those things that we've learned from that practice and create it into something new in a textile world, for instance, as an example? I'm trying to be general. And then I guess when you put it out there, the feedback I find very often is facile, is not useful, creating a conversation community that converses. Is that more compelling? Is it more useful to people? Is it necessary for your art practice? I think I've gone off script, sorry, but some of the
That's great.
go ahead, MelVee, go. I'm tired. I can't even talk anymore.
Well, one thing I want to stress, or an expectation that I believe the public and as artists generally we need to be cognizant of, is that going online doesn't replicate the experience of being in person. And that's one thing that I've really taken away from performing. I've done this kind of, what I'm seeing is like the three types, right? I've hosted workshops and shows. I've performed in one live, but the preference live is in like, okay, it's your turn, go. And then sending in a video recording that is then part of a showcase. So I've done the three types. Now, it seems like the least favorite, or the least preferred type is the middle of saying, hey, it's your turn, go and perform. And that to me really communicates clearly that there's a limitation in the form. And I always kind of thought of like film and video as like, oh, this is this very labor intensive, expensive art form that is typically inaccessible to a lot of people. And I think more and more as you're moving into this virtual realm, like that, the proof is in the pudding, right? The fact that it is very difficult to perform in front of the camera, and to have that feel of connection with the audience. You can't replicate that online. One of the things that I've found has been kind of worthwhile is, for myself, I would say personally, is really understanding what makes good facilitation. I've been facilitating for years now. I didn't actually anticipate it was going to be part of my artistic practice. I think it's partly personality. I if I'm in a space, I think it's important that everybody feels welcome in the space, and then people kind of extend it to, oh, this person must teach workshops, and I do that now, and I have for years. But I've kind of just gone by feel in terms of facilitation and what's worked for me, and I've never really thought deeply about it until now that I've been more so on the receiving end of facilitation, and very bad facilitation. And it's like, oh, right, that is a skill set that doesn't just happen by magic. And I think that we're seeing that in this Zoom realm, that the importance of being able to hold a space. And so that's one of the things I'm seeing, as we continue on these online engagements, is learning the importance of holding a space and what are the limitations of what can reasonably be shared with the public, right? For, you know, I've been moving into the visual realm within the last, I would say, you know, 2 to 3 years. I currently have an exhibit sitting in the dark at Arts Commons again, and you know, and they've put it all, they've digitized it all now. We haven't gotten word yet when we'll do our artist talk. It might just be online now. And I say just, I don't want to dismiss, you know, the online format, but who wants to give an artist talk in front of this bloody thing? You know, I mean, I one thing I did put in my practice is the screen. I've had this screen actually for almost a decade, and it's sat on my balcony the last like 4 or 5 years doing nothing. And I was gonna actually get rid of it before the pandemic hit. I was like, what am I doing with this thing? You know, it's just baggage. And now I'm like, oh, I'm in the money now, because boy, can I just hide whatever's going on back there. So, I mean, from a practical perspective now, like, to know what is actually in a frame of somebody's vision is more and more important. And that has been training, you know, my photographer's eye as well. It's like, oh, right. You know, if I have a bunch of crap in the back there, right, people may not hear a word I'm saying because they're looking at all the crap that's behind me. So I've really been, you know, one of the positives is training, you know, my eye in that way. And theater, like theater formats, right? You can't replicate theater by filming it, because then it's a film in a way. So it's like there's a reason those forms are distinct, and now theater people are being forced to, you know, be in this realm. And I was part of a workshop, you know, for kids, and we had to do it online, of course. And the producer or the director was not convinced that we could do it successfully. And like the call, like our rehearsal was supposed to be in person. I was like, what? And obviously that didn't happen. And so we did the rehearsal, the tech run, and then the actual performance online, and she said it worked.
Yeah.
And so, you know, having to adapt. I mean, I'm not a theater person. I incorporate some of those elements because I'm a performer, but to see, you know, how now theater artists are having to really think about this form and take it more seriously. And again, you can't replicate what you would do on a theater. You can't replicate a burlesque performance, you know, on Zoom. But there is something to be said for, okay, yes, we are all forced to be in this situation together. And, you know, another positive is I'm getting to see shows and performers now that I would not have in person, right? And that is one avenue it opens up. And so I think, you know, even at, you know, at whatever point we can gather in en masse again, right? I think we would be really remiss if we didn't continue to think about how to reach audiences that can't physically be there, from an accessibility point of view, and also now geographically. It's important to realize, okay, having a format like this really opens up the possibility of you know, accessing audiences and people that you couldn't have in person before. I think I answered some part of the question. I like the off script.
Yeah, absolutely. From just touching on what you said there, the last spring I taught a workshop for the Banff Center from Black Diamond, and normally it's like just a drawing workshop that they do like once a month or something, and normally it's only kind of open to residents of Banff or Canmore, so that's like kind of limiting. But because it was online, it was like, oh, there's people in Montreal and Toronto and England who are joining.
Yeah.
It was more accessible, and yeah, just like you said.
Oh, Katie, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Sound is not very good.
Oh, if you put your mouth closer to the mic, we can hear you.
Yes. Okay. And then we're going to wrap it up. We're going to talk about people you look to, a mentor or another practitioner, but also we're EAR is thinking we would really like to use our channel as a safe meeting place for artists to meet, talk about work.
We lost you again, Katie.
Oh, I'm sorry. What? My iTunes keeps popping off and on, and I've quit it so many times, and I'm really annoyed. Luckily,
the laptop's way of saying I've worked hard enough. It's time for my break.
I guess my computer is like, now, time for music. Please, Levin, if you can speak. And also, if you could talk about how EAR is trying to create safe meeting places on Zoom for artists to talk about artwork and practice. Maybe you could talk about that and any mentors and any people who've really helped you.
Right. So you were cutting in and out there, but what I imagine for the question, all good. I think the question was about mentors and people you look up to, and I find that there's so many people that I look up to, even sort of from afar, on like, wow, I think you're doing really cool work. Or even I just think you're a cool person, and you know, it's easy to say that someone is cool, but I think what I find cool about people is the energy that they bring into spaces, and the not even just the amount of products per se or art that they're making, but yeah, the energy that they put into it. A lot of folks I know, I'm trying to think of people who are sort of specific mentors to me. I wouldn't say that I have like one person who I would consider my one mentor. I know that a lot of my profs at school have been pretty influential on me as a person. But also I would say Rocio Graham, who's a local artist. She's super amazing. Yeah, love Rocio. And even like Tammy McDonald, who's another local artist. A lot of drag artists right now really inspire me, local drag artists. Yeah, there's so many. And I think, yeah, always what really is exciting to me about somebody's art is, like I said before, is the energy that they bring into space, and the oftentimes the honesty and not even vulnerability per se, but it can be that sometimes, like um, the way they approach creating a sense of community or a sense of togetherness has always been something that has made me really go, wow, there are such cool things people are doing, and cool seems to be the word of the day here.
It is the word of the day, and thank you. That's really helpful. Alberta, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I feel like I've been pretty fortunate in my life to also have like I said before, support and mentorship from various folks throughout my life, different stages of my life. Like in high school, our family was pretty poor growing up, and so I would go to the high school after school was done, and I would just like paint in the classroom. And then my art teacher was like, he found out I was there until like 9 p.m. one day. And he was like, why don't you just take some jars of paint home, and then you can paint at home. And so it's just like him like letting me steal art supplies was his way of supporting me. And then also like another high school teacher, I transferred schools, and then she gave me a sketchbook, and like also was really supportive and like trying to facilitate my growth as an artist. And then also I do live like 2 blocks away from like this really incredible Dene artist named Bruno Canadian. And so I've known him for like 22 years since I was 15 years old. And like seeing his art practice and like growing to understand what it was has been really amazing. And just like bumping into him around town has been really nice. And like seeing, like we've been in a couple of shows together as well. And just, I think like in general, throughout my life, I've been lucky to like other artists who are like my peers. I feel like also influenced by them or like admire their work, like Jackie for one of them, who I've been friends with for a few, like, 10 years now, I think. Coming up on 10 years
Yeah,
since
something
I've
like
met
that.
Jackie in art college.
Hmm.
And then also just other Indigenous artists that I've met through doing the practice home and dance and doing other art related things. So I think it's like all around me.
That's great. It's great to have supports and see mentors in so many places, and you know, that's fantastic. That's lovely, and I'm glad to hear that, you know, you're still connecting with people. MelVee, I'm sure you're connecting with people.
Shamelessly.
That's a big thing.
Well, you know, as I was reading the questions over last night, and the second one I think was around, you know, does Calgary support you? And you know, my answer to that is twofold, and ties into mentorship. As a city, no, but individual artists, I feel supported by. There are, you know, there are organizations and companies that have, you know, supported my practice in ways that are very visible and sometimes invisible, you know, to me, right? Like people getting your name out there and saying how, you know, they appreciated your work, or how amazing you were, or what have you. You know, that's people supporting you in a way that you won't even know, right? Unless they tell you, or somebody tells you, so and so told me about you, you won't even know that, right? And so I definitely know that there are so many people who support my practice here in this city, and I'm always torn, because Calgary has this, you know, this world-class, you know, incredible artistic scene and community, and we get known internationally for the Calgary Stampede. And, you know, I mean, okay, the Stampede is, you know, it's got its place, its history, what have you. And Western arts, you know, in the terms of like Western Canada, there's, you know, beautiful, incredible art that's come out of that tradition, or in that theme. But, you know, the city as a whole, we have this, you know, this vibrant arts community, and and the fucking blue ring. Sorry, I don't know if you have to cut that from the recording, but you know, it's just like, gosh, god damn it. And I was talking to my spouse, who isn't a mentor at all, but he's done so much for my artistic practice. Actually, here's an example. So I had a potato themed burlesque show that I was hosting last week. He made this. It's a potato Lion King baby, and he made that.
I love
And
it.
and when I asked him to glue on the eyes and the nose and the little dress around it, didn't even ask me why. He just got the glue gun and just made it happen. And so, to me, like, there's so many people in my life who support my practice. My parents, you know, they were pretty neutral, but now they're proud of what I do. I've never really had like direct mentorship, you know, in the sense of like, I've talked to somebody and they are now my mentor. And part of that is, you know, I've come into the scene of my own, the scenes that I'm in of my own accord, and just kind of forged a path, whether it was there or not. So I haven't really had mentors in that sense. And I see now some of the pitfalls that I've you know, fallen into as an artist were a direct result of not having that mentorship or that formal training. And so I guess for myself now, I look at my practice, and then a growing part of it is that mentorship piece of giving back. I have, I forgot to mention, I think it was asked in email, there's a program that I created called Black Kid Joy, and it's, you know, it's teaching Black youth empowerment through the arts. They're going to have a showcase February the 20th online. So, you know, hold on to your hats for that. But I created that program because I thought, what did I need as a, you know, as a young Black artist that I didn't have, and I wanted to create the program that didn't exist. And so more and more I see myself you know, in that role of mentorship and being a resource for up and coming artists. Again, not that I planned on it, but I feel like a lot of my artistic practice was not planned. So, you know, that's okay that that's part of it. And there's other projects that you know, I'm working on or will be working on that involve a component of kind of, you know, guidance to younger people. And I do take that seriously. And you know, kind of in the note of you know, honoring Amy and her legacy. I realized, I was going through my mental Rolodex and trying to think, okay, where did I meet her? I know I've seen her in person, and it was at this meeting, this Treaty 7 Film Collective meeting. And two things stuck out to me about Amy: her love of her son and her dedication to Indigenous people and artists. And so, you know, our paths never crossed again. I think we were on an ear panel together like a year before that, but that, like, those were the two times in my life that I'd ever seen, you know, Amy or talked to her. And I can recall those, and just from those brief interactions, I knew exactly what she was about, right? And I think that is the power of an artist, is that you may only get that one interaction with that person. And I see it as, you know, as an honor and a responsibility. You know, what's that message that I want to impress upon people or leave with people, right? Because this may be the only time we're all gathered together in a space, right? And so I think, what do I want people to, you know, to remember about me, that I am passionate about community and my people, and that I live my vision of empowering marginalized people to tell our own stories from our own perspectives. And so, you know, those, I kind of live with that purpose now of, that's how I want to be seen, and hopefully that's how I'm living my life. And that's what we do as artists. We can like change people's like impression or perspective with one piece or one interaction, and that's our power, that's our magic.
That's really great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We have a little bit of time. We can take a couple questions if we have any questions out there floating around from other people, just for a couple. Or, you know, if you aren't comfortable doing that, maybe email us at our email site, and we'll try to get them answered for you. It's been a great day. You guys have really helped, I think, well, me, because I don't know, but you've helped me really get a great picture of how you are working and the kinds of things that are helping you. We hope that yours helping you, and we want to become a connection point for everybody. So Jacqueline has posted in the chat, our email is earprogramming@gmail.com. Do we have any questions out there, Jackie, from anybody?
So far, no. A few people have actually joined in and left the conversation, which is quite nice, more than I thought coming in.
Good.
I kind of had a question. As myself as an artist, I've always had a complicated relationship with Calgary, just in terms of like what it wants to show, how conservative it is. And I never saw myself like staying in Calgary. Is there a place in the world, if you could live there, doesn't matter, like no limitations, where would you want to live to pursue your art practice? Anyone, doesn't matter.
I could go. I would. I have two places that pop out right away. St. Lucia, because art is kind of viewed differently there. Like, you're a doctor, a lawyer, right? Artists, like, there's this strong like musical like scene, and like, you know, we have artists that make world class, like known around the world music, but in terms of arts, like anything that's not music, I don't see the support for that. So it'd be interesting to you know, to practice in a place that's not necessarily, like, I know from the jump going to be supportive. And you know, what would that be like, right? Because it was kind of like, once I made the decision to like do spoken word, like nobody was like, don't do it, you know, like, or that's dumb, you know, like I never got that. And so it'd be interesting, not to say like that, you know, people, you know, back home would either, but it would be interesting to see what is that dynamic like, to have an artistic practice in a place where, you know, there isn't like, you know, we have public advocacy around the arts in Calgary, right? And more artists in the city are becoming vocal about, you know, like respecting the arts and having it on, you know, the public policy and public agenda. And so I think it'd be interesting to practice in a place that's like actually like may not even have that on the radar. And then I think it would be really interesting for me to go to Nigeria. That's where likely my ancestors were stolen from. And so just to see the artistic expression there and to practice again, where the emphasis is different. Nigeria has like a massive film industry, textiles are big, music is big. And so it would be like, you know, like again, working in a totally different cultural frame, right? Because as much as I'm like very much so like damn the colonizers, we have to like do decolonization, anti-racism work. It's like, but I was born and raised here in Canada, and so I do have a different frame of reference. And you know, sometimes that gets lost when you're in a place, and then going out of that place, you see the ways that, you know, your cultural upbringing has influenced you. So I think I'd actually rather go to a place where that's not necessarily going to have the same cultural frame of reference at all as myself, and see how that challenges me and provides different, you know, limitations and whatnot.
Well, that's really cool.
That's fascinating.
I'm going to make Alberta answer that question too. Thank you, MelVee.
I think that's a hard question for me to answer, just because I love Calgary. I have a lot of friends and family in the area, and you know, but I do also feel like I would love to just, I don't know, live in a van and drive around the country and experience living in different places for a little while, and then like kind of move on. And like, I have friends in like some different cities throughout, you know, Canada and the world. So if I had like unlimited money or something, I would probably just travel around and like live in a van or something.
Well, that'd be fun too. I'd love to do that as well. Just travel everywhere.
Yeah. So I do follow like accounts on Instagram that are like, you know, keep converting their vans into like little houses or something. And I'm like, realistically, I don't know if I could ever actually do it, but like maybe for like a few months or something.
Yeah. Thanks. How about you, Levin?
Yeah, honestly, I don't completely know how to answer that question either. I think I'm in the same sort of boat where if I had unlimited money and resources, I would love to be able to see if there is a place other than this city that that really hits something for me. That but I haven't feel like I don't know if there is a place, and I haven't feel like if there is, I don't feel like I've found it yet. But I think also there's something really valuable about what MelVee was saying, in that like I would love the opportunity to go to a place, because I've and this is for different reasons, but I think because I've built connections in the city, I would love to go to somewhere where those connections are a bit are either not there or different, or just to see what would come out of that, and to see if I could make a feeling of togetherness and community in another place. And yeah, would love the opportunity to do that in whatever way. I mean, for context, I've lived in the city my whole life, and so I feel very, yeah, I have a mixed relationship with it as well.
Yeah, I totally get it. Thank you so much, Levin. And thank you, MelVee and Alberta, for joining us today. Thank you, Katy, for being an amazing interviewer. And thank you, Jill, for
topic
joining.
interviewer.
Oh, you were great, Katy.
It was great.
It was.
Oh, thanks. You guys were really great to talk to, and I'm so fascinated by what you're going to do. I can't wait.
Cool.
Thank you for having us. I had a great time. You never know how these online panels are going to go.
Yeah.
And so, Katy's facilitation was excellent. It was great communication throughout. And even though it's like, more intimate, I mean, Lily, it's been here since the beginning, hasn't left. So, I mean, and I think that's what matters, right? Is, we've had people come in and out and, get to enjoy, and it feels like a conversation. It doesn't feel like, we're just answering questions for the sake of answering questions, which is what I look for on a panel. Does this kind of feel organic? I think someone mentioned in the chat, or is it like this stilted, like we must get through these questions? Damn, conversation be damned.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm really glad, because this is only my second time doing this.
Wow.
But it is fascinating to hear people's journeys, artistic journeys, because they're so varied. Yeah, it's been really great talking to you all.
Cool.
And if people didn't get to make it today, Jackie is a whiz, and she has started this awesome YouTube channel. So we get to do this all the time.
Yeah, I am learning
in the
video
background
editing.
while you're doing something else.
Right.
Yeah, it's great. So we have how many videos now? 4? 3?
About
This will be
5.
our 4th one.
We have a
5 videos on
Yeah.
our YouTube channel. So check it out and subscribe, as they say.
Thank you so much. If any of you guys have further follow-up questions, please email me at yourprogramming@gmail.com. Also, please stay tuned for our upcoming events. I'm hopefully be able to do more YouTube stuff. I think it's really a good venue. But we might have to cut out, because I do know Alberta has to leave.
Oh, that's okay.
So thank you, everyone, again. If there's nothing else, I might just end the conversation.
Thank you.
See you later.
Everyone.
Wow.
Bye, everyone watching.